Oh, good Lord Jesus, protect my fragile soul, because I am actually optimistic now, and I'm not sure I want to be. After Dawn of War 3, feeling any sense of relief or optimism towards a Relic strategy game feels dangerously similar to dipping one's family jewels into a piranha pond, and yet the currently ongoing multiplayer pre-alpha test for Company of Heroes 3 plays pretty damn good, and is far closer to the Company of Heroes formula than I actually expected at this point. Particularly as the previous test had a lot of prickly little mini issues that all combined into making the game feel off. Like it just didn't have that Company of Heroes feeling to it. Everything from the sound effect to the voice acting to the sound of the rifles to the way the camera moved, the units moved, etc. It all just wasn't quite there. And yet, whatever they've done in the meantime, they've managed to fix most of that to the point that right now, this feels pretty much like Company of Heroes 1. The way the units move, the quality of the voice acting, the sound effects, the near non-stop action, and the constant pressure to be doing something somewhere, to be capping something, to be moving somewhere, to be engaging over there, to be fighting an armored duel here, to be engaging in infantry battles, to be using hand grenades and call-ins, etc. It's really solid. Now there are some obvious issues, some obvious bugs, like you can see what appears to be massive performance issues on screen, but for once, do not believe your lying eyes. It's not actually the game chugging, it apparently is something to do with the scrolling in the game. So every time you scroll or move the camera, the game wigs out hardcore, but the actual game itself runs buttery smooth, to the point that even in the biggest of battles with artillery shells flying back and forth, there is no actual lag. It's just that somehow they managed to make scrolling the camera chug the game's frames. Don't ask me how, I couldn't even begin to explain, but they managed, and this is, again, apparently a bug that they're currently working on. But beyond all of these little issues, beyond all of the missing assets and the straight up missing sound files, the Tiger is particularly funny because it makes no sound as it moves. Quiet and deadly in the extreme, or the fact that when you send a German crew to man an American anti-tank gun captured on the battlefield, they suddenly adopt perfect American English accents. Yeah, there are a lot of little things like that, but it's a pre-alpha open test game. It is to be expected. And you know what's most shocking at all? The balance actually feels alright. Now that is shocking. That is weird. That is abnormal. Normally speaking, Relic games is like a diarrhea volcano as far as balance is concerned, particularly on something new. Good God. This is a game company that is lethally allergic to testing out anything before releasing it, as Winter Assaults or Dark Crusade or practically any of their preceding game demonstrated beyond the shadow of a doubt. Oh God, I still have nightmares about Chaos Rising and the goddamn Juggernaut, which came out literally so early that there was no mathematical possibility that you had any anti-tank weaponry to deal with it. And yet this, again, bear in mind though, it is far too early to say anything definite about balance, but it's quite good. If anything, I would give a slight advantage to the US right now, in particular because of how powerful their armored doctrine is. But beyond that, it's very good. Of course, up until this point now, I've played a handful of skirmish matches against the AI just to figure out what everything is, and a handful of multiplayer matches, some 2v2 and some 1v1 as well, so we can't be authorities, any of us, on the real balance at the moment, but There are many interesting little tweaks. One of the cool things they've added is that they appear to be adding a multi-layered system when it comes to customizing your forces both in-game and presumably before the game as well. The Germans, for example, get a choice between 3 field marshals that all do different things and give different abilities to your infantry squads and your various units, giving them, for example, an incendiary grenade or a rifle grenade, giving your units the ability to use specialized ammunition like tungsten armor piercing rounds for the Marder 3. And then you also choose 1 out of 2 battle groups, which themselves also have 2 trees, with several little choices where you can choose one thing, then you get a choice between 2 other things, then choose one of those, and you move on to the next 2 choices, and then one final choice at the end, and a bit of a splitting tree. This is really darn cool, as it gives you the old school doctrinal ideas of Company of Heroes 1 combined with the commanders of Company of Heroes 2, and you get to decide all of that on the fly. Very intriguing. And the best part is too, the differences are actually really pronounced. For example, if you go with one doctrine, your half-track gets the ability to reinforce troops on the battlefield and heal them up as well. But that's the only thing it gets. On another doctrine, you might get access to a repair upgrade instead. That's quite interesting. Or a anti-tank gun upgrade. For example, with the M3 half-track, if you pick the armored doctrine, I believe, you get to upgrade it with a 75mm anti-tank cannon instead of upgrading it with a medic upgrade. That's quite cool, because again, that's some pretty major differences. Just like the difference between a rifle grenade and an incendiary grenade is a pretty major one as well. There are also battle group changes that actually change the units you've already got on the field. For the Americans, for example, you can start out with the basic Pathfinders, which can be upgraded to airborne Pathfinders, way better, or your basic engineers can be upgraded to combat engineers. This adds in a lot of depth and interesting variety to the game. It really does, and opens up a tremendous amount of possibilities further down the road for a little bit of customization and monetization. Now, I talked about this with Dawn of War 3. I really have no problems whatsoever with Relic DLC-ifying their games like Company of Heroes or Dawn of War. I really don't. As long as it's mostly cosmetic, or you add in nice, big, fleshed out options. Company of Heroes 2 with just the commanders, I thought that wasn't a particularly good DLC vector, but if you add in a commander and a battle group doctrine with maybe a unique unit here and there, that could be pretty cool. What they do need to avoid, however, is the COH2 syndrome, where they would actually put out commanders that would have all the same abilities that you already had, but rearranged a little bit. So they took one ability from this commander and 2 abilities from that commander, slapped them together, and called it a third commander, which they would then charge for. That was quite asshole-ish. And of course, this opens up some potential problems with the balancing as well, as some commanders might be just inherently better than others, though again, right now, most of them feel pretty good and focused on very different things. And interestingly enough as well, you could choose, for the Americans for example, to go with the armored upgrade on your headquarters, giving you access to different types of armored vehicles, and you could then also go for the airborne battle group, giving you access to some heavier armor and airborne infantry. I like the system. It is really intriguing, and I want to see where they take it from here. They've also mentioned that they will be launching with more factions than ever before, which, in case of Company of Heroes, I think is literally 2, so that won't be difficult to beat. I would imagine British. They've shown a lot of British troops, so the British are undoubtedly going to be in. As for the Germans, part of me really wants to see Italy, but at the same time, Italy didn't have a whole lot of really good equipment. Most of their stuff were mediocre at best, and certainly not up to, say, the Panzer IV or the Sherman tank or the Stug, although they did have some good assault guns, and I believe we've also seen some Italian call-in units as well. That's another interesting thing too, with the potential addition of customizable battle groups. That could be really interesting. But to move on from the commanders for a second here, because as cool as they are just a part of it all, of course. The combat itself feels really solid. Not too fast, and definitely not too slow either. It is difficult to kill an entire enemy unit, as it should be, particularly when they're retreating, but it's not impossible. Nor is it, I have not been able to see yet, a single attack wiping an entire unit, which is very important, because I hated that in the previous games, where one of your units would just disappear out of nowhere, and you had no chance or opportunity whatsoever to actually react to what was happening. Right now, it seems like you are always going to be at least two-shotted, so you'll always have an opportunity to get the hell out of the way. Now, there are some issues there, which are in part alpha. Right now, for example, it is gosh darn difficult to see if you're being attacked by a grenade. There's supposed to be a little bar over the enemy's head, a little loading bar that will fill up as they take aim with the grenade and then throw it. Currently, the bar doesn't work. It only shows up half of the time, and when it does show up, it doesn't actually fill. And it is... There's very little of the old trails anymore, so you've either got to just kind of guess and intuit when the grenade might be coming and move before time, or you need to zoom in and just keep a super close eye on all of the enemy units for when they start doing the grenade animation. There's also the breaching system. The breaching system is interesting. I've yet to form really a full opinion on that. It doesn't kill the entire enemy squad, but it does force it out of the building with heavy casualties and on super low health. So you gotta be very careful not to get breached, as it's gonna get really expensive really quickly. And at the same time, though, I also found that shooting units out of buildings isn't really that difficult. Particularly not now, as well, as there's probably a bit of a bug with the accuracy of a lot of artillery and mortars. This is one of the reasons why I say that currently the Americans are probably a little bit better than the Germans, particularly when they go for the armored doctrine. The 76mm long-barreled Sherman will absolutely eat Panzer IVs for breakfast. And when you then also get the M8 with a little howitzer being able to zoom across the battlefield and deliver pinpoint GPS-guided HE onto enemy infantry and weapon emplacements, that is really goddamn powerful, because the Shermans will kill the enemy tanks, and if they start bringing up a pack, the M8 will just call up to orbit and GPS coordinate down the Excalibur round to kill it long before it manages to pack down and move. That one is a little bit unfortunate. I remember the same bug was in Company of Heroes 2 as well, though even more pronounced. The 120mm mortars in the beta there were hilarious, because they could fire from so far away you wouldn't even know you were under fire before a laser-guided mortar round wiped out one of your squads. It was quite the thing. Oh gosh, it was quite the thing, yes. But again, that'll hopefully be fixed, because they do need a little bit more, variety in where they hit. Because right now, they are snipers, and they absolutely butcher infantry. The infantry combat is also fairly well paced. You get some relatively lengthy firefights. When people are in heavy cover, that is a major advantage, and if you are in heavy cover and the enemy is in medium, you win straight up. If you catch the enemy out of cover and they have to move into cover, you're going to get a decisive advantage there as well. All of those things are very good. The only real complaint I might have is it feels a bit awkward the way the German infantry upgrading system is set up, where you actually take the initial grenadier squads, off the battlefield, losing the squad and its veterancy in the process, and replacing it with a Jaeger squad. Or a Panzergrenadier squad. Now, you can also build the Panzergrenadiers without doing this, but it feels a bit odd to replace the whole squad. I guess it's a way to kind of transition away from the basic Grenadiers, as they now have very little in the way of actual upgrade options, whereas the Jaegers come as a full squad with G43s, which is nothing to sneeze at, and the Panzergrenadiers come equipped with tons of STG-44s. So the American infantry is far more versatile and can be upgraded with grenades and bars, whereas the German infantry is more focused and specialized, which is again good, as it adds an asymmetrical style of warfare. And speaking of asymmetrical warfare, another little cool thing they've done is that they've reduced the weight of armor on the field. The biggest, baddest thing you can bring in without any additional battle doctrines or marshals, etc., is a Panzer IV and a short-barreled Sherman, which gives the Germans a bit of an advantage. The Panzer IV and the Sherman are fairly well matched, but I found that the Panzer IV is maybe a tiny bit better, a little bit better. And that means that the actual heavy armor, like the Tiger, which you can only have one of, is way more interesting and valuable because they're way more powerful. When it isn't dealing with hordes of M10s or Panthers moving across the field, the Tiger becomes way more of a significant addition to your army. It also means that the lighter tanks, like the Chaffee or the M8 Greyhound or the Marder III, are more valuable for a longer period of time. The Chaffee is actually a halfway decent fight for a Stug, for example. With a little bit of micro, a little bit of popping in and out in there, you can deal some serious damage to even a Stug, which should be a heavier thing. Though, a lot of the lighter vehicles still do fall a little bit by the wayside, like the German scout car, for example, with just a machine gun on top. It's very resilient to bullets, so it could be an early game harasser, but it's a lot of fuel to potentially sink into something where the enemy might get a Greyhound or a Chaffee, which would, of course, eat it for absolute lunch. Again, the whole balancing and the value of various vehicles will have to be determined much further down the development process, but I like the idea of bringing the focus back a bit more on the medium armor and making the heavy stuff stand out more by comparison, though. To be fair, the Germans do have a Brummbau as one of their basic armor pieces, and that is, that's pretty heavy armor, no doubt about it. Where there is a weakness, however, is the call-in system right now. The call-ins feel a bit off. The airstrikes in particular, the incoming aircraft look incredibly stiff and derpy, and you can see them jerking around the screen as they come in, and they all fly retardedly low, of course. The strafing run and the bombing run, they're all a little bit too narrow, like they're pinpoint precise almost, and they take a while to get in, so I doubt anyone will be hit by those much, honestly. The artillery strikes too feel like they're a little bit too scented, so they're almost more pinpoint barrages more than saturation artillery. But some artillery, like the German spotter bunker arty, that's far more wide-reaching again, so it might simply just be a balancing issue there too. There's also some anti-aircraft abilities in the game. I haven't seen them successfully shoot anything down yet, but there are things that shoot up, which is neat, certainly. And I gotta end with a note on the sound design, because this is one of the things that Relic were just the best at back in the day. Sound design and voice acting were two of Relic's greatest strengths, which were sorely lacking, along with many other things, in Dawn of War 3. God damn that video game. And thank the heavens, here it is back up to standard once again. The guns sound great, the voice acting sounds great, and the little attention to detail, like the fact that the weapon fire will sound different depending upon how far away you are from the battle, is really great. Additionally, the engine sound of tanks is absolutely superb, and you can even, to an extent, identify what kind of enemy vehicle is off in the fog of war dependent upon its engine sound, which is really, really kind of cool. Except for the Tiger, of course, which doesn't have any engine sound at the moment. Silent but deadly. All in all, this is actually shaping up to maybe be something, which is, on the one hand, it's really nice to say, because strategy games have suffered for a long time now with not a whole lot going on, and Relic was one of the real luminaries in the RTS genre, which sadly fell pretty damn far and hard from grace, starting with Company of Heroes 2, which released in not a very good state, although it certainly picked up very well over the time, and then the abomination, the crime, the betrayal that saw them get turned into a subcontractor for Microsoft. Sigh. Now, Age of Empires was also not a bad entry at all, but you could kind of tell that Relic's heart wasn't really in it. It was a job to them. It was contract work. They developed and developed. They delivered, that was the word I was looking for, a functional and entirely sufficient product, but it lacked that usual Relician flair, and maybe Company of Heroes 3 will finally be the return of that flair. Now, in large part, I do believe that this is because they decided to listen to the community very, very early on, which is the correct thing to do, and I cannot applaud Relic enough for that. And so far, honestly, the one fear I had with that, and the one that I think that they've managed to avoid so far, was a little bit of the same misstep that they made with Dawn of War 2. Dawn of War 2 was intended to be a far more welcoming and newbie-friendly experience, where they figured like, okay, let's back off on the base building, let's have a little bit less units, and let's remove some of the micromanagement in battle with reinforcing squads on the fly and so on. So we'll do fewer units with a bigger focus on a little bit of micromanagement. That'll make the game more welcoming to new players, right? And initially, yes. But once the first month or so had passed and people started figuring out what they were doing, a heavy micro game, there is nothing less welcoming to a new player. As you build your unit, you wander out on the battlefield, all happy-go-lucky, like, oh boy, funny RTS video game. And then you get absolutely mercilessly demolished by half your number of units because the other guy is so much better at controlling them. And that control is all down to practice and getting used to how everything worked. I mean, to be fair, that was one of the really cool things about Dawn of War 2 as well. The bullshit you could pull off if you knew how to do it and you were good enough. For example, the Eldar Farseer. No, not Farseer, the Warp Spider had a armor upgrade that created a stasis field around him that caught all enemy troops in it. Now, initially, you can actually cancel that stasis field whenever you want to. So you could bring up 3 Guardian squads with plasma grenades and throw them all on an enemy unit, wait just until before they exploded and they hit the retreat button, boom, squad wipe. Later on, they fixed it so that you couldn't do that, you couldn't cancel it, it had to go its full duration, but all that did was make me go like, okay, I just need to remember how long it lasts, and then plasma grenade nuke the bastard. Yeah. Or Triple Tyrannid back in the good old days of Dawn of War 2. It was literally an unbeatable strat. In 3v3, you could not beat Triple Tyrannid. There was literally no way, because one player would just build Reapers and cap every point on the map with unsuppressible, unkillable capping Reaper squads. Oh, the good old days indeed. But anywho, what I was going to say is, one of the errors that I hope to see Relic avoid, and one of the problems with asking the community for too much help, is that community often means the professional streamers and the quote-unquote pro gamers, and they usually have very different opinions of what is and isn't important compared to the average player. One of the things that I still absolutely hate about Dawn of War 2 is that they decided to remove sync kills from the basic infantry. That is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. The sync kills were the coolest part about Dawn of War. Always has been, always will be. And removing that key, defining, iconic feature because the pro gamers, all 5 of them, couldn't get used to it? No. No, 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 no. 9. Bad Relic, but so far, I'm not seeing any overt signs of that kind of issue here, so help me God, but I actually think we might have reason to be optimistic here. Please don't prove me wrong, Relic. Until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for listening, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.